Have you ever gone on a trip and you had so much fun that you wished that it was longer? Or have you ever eaten vanilla ice cream and thought to yourself, yeah, this is good, but I wish I had some sprinkles or some mochi to spice this baby up? Or have you ever beaten a video game and didn't want that experience to end? Well, if you've answered yes to any of these questions, then it sounds like what you need is some good old-fashioned DLC, or downloadable content. Almost every game these days has it, sometimes before the game is even out. At base value, every DLC functions as a way to extend a game's lifespan and can consist of anything from player skins to massive campaigns. There are a multitude of examples of good DLCs that have been released for games, but the ones from Fallout New Vegas seem to have a longer lasting effect than most of the others that I've played. After my first playthrough, I thought they were some of the best DLCs to ever be made for any game, and I'm not alone. See, much like vanilla New Vegas, the DLCs are often held in the same high regard. Being such a big fan of the game by itself, I thought that it was time to jump back in and see what made these DLCs so great. In total, there are 6 DLCs that this game saw over its run. I'm not going to be covering the Courier Stash and Gun Runner's Arsenal add-ons though. The former is just bonus items that the player starts with at the beginning of the game, and while Gun Runner's Arsenal offers unique items, challenges, and achievements, it's more like a passive experience. It doesn't have the same caliber as the other DLCs released. With that being said though, these add-ons do make New Vegas feel more complete, and I wouldn't want to miss out on them, especially Gun Runner's Arsenal. To help cover and rank the DLCs, I'm going to use a system that I will judge every one of them by. Each DLC will be ranked by 5 factors. Characters, which go over the different people and interactions that you have with them during your time playing. Story, which evaluates what and why things are happening that the player gets to go through. Setting, which will rank the different and unique locations that the DLC has to offer. Fun factor, which is just how I felt playing it. And last is the overall effect that it has on the game as a whole. I'll call this last one longevity. Each category will be ranked out of 10 and will help to decide which one I think is the best and which one I think is the worst. Now with the explanation out of the way, let's dust off our pit boys and load up our big irons because we're jumping back into New Vegas with its first DLC, Dead Money. To start this DLC, you have to go to the abandoned Brotherhood of Steel bunker, which foreshadows one of the main players coming up. As soon as you enter the bunker, you see words, "Gone to Sierra Madre," ominously written on a wall. Laying next to it is a dead body with its head blown off, carrying a jar of cloud residue. What's going on here is a mystery, but we intend to find out. Progressing further, the game tells us a short snippet of what is to come, and that once we start, we cannot return to the Mojave until we are finished. So, better bring your best weapons and armor, because we may be here for a while. Going down the hallway, we see a single radio in the middle of a room, but before we can reach it, we get gassed and knocked out. When we wake up, we're in a totally different place. A much darker and dead place. In front of us, a man starts to speak through a hologram with the name Father Elijah. He tells us to shut up and listen to him, or else he will detonate the bomb collar that he put around our neck. Great, so that's what happened to the person that we saw earlier. He collected us here because he has a plan to break into the Sierra Madre casino and steal its treasures. A heist, if you will. To do this, you need to find other members of the team that are scattered around the villa. You all have to cooperate with each other because if one person's collar goes off, they all do, killing everyone. Already, I love this DLC's premise. Assembling an ace team to pull off a heist isn't a new idea, but a fun one that is new to Fallout. Also, so far, there are allusions with the film from the 40s, The Treasure of the Sierra Madre, starring Humphrey Bogart. Obviously in name, but also in the way that the main characters have to work together towards a common goal of treasure, even though they may not trust each other.
These are the men who tried to tap the treasure of the Sierra Madre. Men with an oath on their lips and muscles in their arms, but men with greed in their hearts.
So, first things first, we have to find our teammates. Father Elijah points us in the direction of the police station, where he suspects one is waiting. The first thing that you'll notice once you start moving is that all of your weapons and items that you brought with you are gone. So it looks like we didn't need to bring our stuff with us after all. This DLC is the kind that forces you in a state of disadvantage, and you have to scrounge around for weapons, armor, and ways to heal. Essentially, it's like first starting the game. The enemies that are here to greet us are these ghost harvester people. The only way to kill them is to chop off one of their limbs. If you can't do that, they'll keep getting up until you do. Get used to having to stop and deliberately chop them up, because they are the only enemy in this whole DLC that you'll be physically fighting. Once we get into the police station, Father Elijah tells us that there is one unforeseen side effect of the bomb collars. Aside from being wrapped around our neck tighter than Tuco Salamanca snorting drugs,
tight, yeah!
The radios in the area can prematurely set off our collars because of their similar frequency, meaning that if you are near a radio, your collar will start beeping until kablamo! This means that for many of the areas, you have to slowly nudge yourself through to see if you are going to make it. It's kind of like slowly getting into a cold pool. It's painful, you could just Hail Mary and jump in, but it will get the job done. Thankfully, you can turn off or shoot the radios to get rid of the beeping, but this isn't always apparent, especially on a first playthrough. After tiptoeing our way through, we finally make it to our first teammate, God.
What have we here? You weren't who I was expecting. I'm disappointed.
God is a Nightkin who is only one side of a coin personality-wise. His other, more animalistic side is Dog. He has two personalities and is constantly struggling with himself to see who can be in control. I love the duality between Dog and God. Their names, though simple, perfectly explain what each personality is like. God is the voice of reason and is intelligent, while Dog is concerned with finding his next meal and obeying Father Elijah, his master. Upon first talking to God, he tells us that we weren't who he was expecting. When we follow up about who God was expecting, he tells us that Father Elijah hoped that we might be this person, implying that whoever this mystery person is shares history with Elijah. This is the beginning of the underlying story that the DLCs tell. See, on top of the main stories, there is also a hidden one that stretches through all the DLCs, tying them together. It doesn't get too in-depth, but gives us little hints on what's to come. Now that we have God, we move on to our next destination. You can actually switch between Dog and God, but I chose to stick with God. He isn't as strong as Dog, but lets you walk through traps without triggering them, which is very useful for finding the next member of our team, Dean Domino.
Get up without my permission. I'll blast your ass so far through your head, it'll turn the moon cherry pie red.
Of all the people we have to recruit, Dean Domino is the most high class of the bunch. He's a prim and proper entertainer from the old world, and I do so adore his demeanor. It takes some persuading to get him to tag along with us, and I appreciate the dialogue options that you have with him. It's an example of where passing a speech check may not be the best route to take. Depending on how you want things to turn out, it may be best to just go along and cater to what Domino wants, but I'll come back to this later. Domino gives us a pretty useful perk. In some areas in the villa, there's this toxic cloud that constantly drains your health. Traveling with Domino gives us a delay before the mist starts to take effect. Also, it's useful for grabbing our last team member, Christine. Christine is an interesting character. She looks like someone cut her up and experimented on her, and she can't talk. The conversations between you two are interesting because a lot of times you have to fill in the blanks yourself and make educated guesses on what she's trying to tell you. She's here because she's actually hunting Father Elijah down for the Brotherhood of Steel. And you know that girlfriend that Veronica mentions in the base game? Yeah, this is her. She also gives us a great ability which blocks out the radio frequencies so we have a longer time to react before our caller goes off. Now that the team is assembled, we gather where we first talked to Elijah to begin the next phase. Now we have to take each team member to their respective positions to start the heist. This is where I'll mention traversing the villa and just how much of a pain it is. Fallout has a great sense of openness in their worlds, with sections of confinement. For example, there are tons of locations to find in the Mojave, and even New Vegas itself feels like a big area to explore with little intricacies here and there. However, there are also several vaults to explore too, which are smaller and more confined. Those spaces work because there's a balance between free open areas and smaller, more restrictive ones. The villa feels very claustrophobic. I feel like there are toxic clouds and radios that will make you explode everywhere. This makes it feel very discouraging to explore, and I feel like I'm missing a lot of items just because I want to get through it so I can leave. This is not what I want from a DLC, especially a Fallout DLC. I want to be able to explore, not formulaically travel through what seems like a set path. And now that I'm talking about not being able to explore, I might as well say it here. There are no side quests in this DLC. None at all. There's only the main quest. It's a shame too because I feel like if this had more side quests, we as players would have more of an opportunity to look around and find cool things. I'll come back to the main quest at the end, but for now, let's move on. Once everyone is in position to do their thing, we activate the Gala control panel to open the doors to the Sierra Madre. For a moment, the clouds open up, and we see the Sierra Madre in its glory, being showered by the light of the fireworks in the distance. It's a strong image, and one that definitely stands out. All that's left to do is rush our way to the casino and avoid the overwhelming amount of enemies along the way. Once we get there though, a familiar situation plays out. It's fair to say that this DLC is split into two parts, the Villa and the Sierra Madre. Thankfully, being in the Sierra Madre is better than the Villa, but there are still some criticisms that carry over. Now we have to re-find our teammates. It may sound redundant, but I actually like having to refine them better than when you first do it. 1, because the Sierra Madre's aesthetic and gameplay are more enjoyable than the villas, and 2, because this encounter that we have with our teammates gives them closure and concludes our interactions with them. This can go a multitude of different ways, but let's start with Dog and God. We find them arguing with each other in the Madre's kitchen, and Dog leaked a bunch of gas in the area. If he sees you, he'll blow up the kitchen with you in it. So you have to disable the gas before you can talk with him. Alternatively, you could just kill him, but that would kill God as well. Talking with him and passing multiple speech checks, you can bring Dog and God together as one. You could also kill just Dog or just God as well, leaving the surviving one as the dominant personality forever. I opted for bringing them together because I felt like that was the best ending for this character, but there really isn't a right or wrong option, which is perfect. Next up is Dean Domino. Remember when I said that it's best to go along with Dean and to not fight him on his ideas? Well, that comes into play here. This is my 3rd time playing through this DLC, and it was the first time that Dean actually wasn't hostile towards me. When we find him, he actually tries to help us instead of fighting us. Once we save him from his situation, he tells us the history of the Sierra Madre and the key people who were associated with it. Mainly, Frederick Sinclair, the founder of the Sierra Madre, and Vera Keyes, his love interest. Sinclair actually had the Sierra Madre built as a gift to Vera, but later found out that Vera and Dean had an affair behind his back. It's some pretty scandalous and sad stuff, but it all ties back into the main theme of this DLC, which we will soon discuss. But for now, we have to find Christine. We find her in Vera Keyes' room, and she can talk! Oddly enough, she actually sounds just like Vera. This conversation with Christine is where she tells us about her past with Elijah and also gives us hints of where the future might bring us. She mentions that she tracked Elijah to a place called the Big Empty, and while she was there, she met another person who knew about Elijah.
A courier. Wore an old world flag on his back. He was the one who pulled me out there. Told me where Elijah had gone.
Just as a reminder, the player character is also a courier. Christine heavily foreshadows what is to come for the player, which ties into what God mentioned when we first met him. Again, on top of the main DLC, we're also getting little seeds of a hidden underlying one. Upon further talking with Christine, the intentions of the builder of the Sierra Madre come into play. It seems that Sinclair still loved Vera, even though she had cheated on him. Even the password to get into the vault is a snippet of her own voice saying the words, "Begin again, but know when to let go." Now that we know the phrase, the only thing left to do is to go into the vault and confront Father Elijah to end this madness. Making your way into the vault is similar to the type of gameplay that we're used to at this point. There are radios that trigger a collar, turrets, and invincible holograms that patrol the area. It might take a couple of times of trial and error, but once you get familiar with the area, you'll eventually reach the vault. Upon opening it, there is a central terminal in the middle of the room, and we begin our final confrontation with Elijah. We get him to come out from his hiding place to confront us, but before we leave the vault, sitting on a table is something that will make any player's heart stop. 37 gold bars, each with a value that surpasses anything else. Even taking 2 already makes you over encumbered, so you can't run or fight very well. Just as I reached my hand to take the rest of the gold, I stopped and remembered what I've been hearing all along. Let go. Begin again, but know when to let go. That's the theme of this DLC. Father Elijah is so obsessed with the treasure and the technology that he's risking not only his life, but the lives of several others just to see it through. Frederick Sinclair couldn't let go of his love for Vera and ultimately got them both killed, leading Vera to write the words "let go" in her room as she waited for her lonely and inevitable death. So seeing all that gold in front of us, knowing that we won't be able to leave this place alive if we take it, there really is only one thing that we can do, and that's to grab as many pieces as we can, hide from Elijah while he walks down the stairs, and then bum rush him so he has no feasible way of fighting back. Plant all of the gold on his elderly body, and then drag it back upstairs and leave him next to the force field. Then, haul fucking dick back the way we came out as our collar is slowly starting to ramp up the beeps before it blows our head off and paints the room cherry pie red. Then, enter third-person mode and glitch the camera on the other side of the force field so we can loot his greedy corpse. Now that we have the gold, we have to slowly drag our feet to freedom. Oh my god! Oh, we made it. And then like magic, we're back in the courtyard. Now the only thing left to do is leave, but once we do so, there is no coming back at all. We get a little ending screen that says what happened to our team, as well as what may happen in the future. And as a final farewell, we hear the main characters of the DLC recant the theme one last time.
Finding it, though. That's not the hard part. It's letting go.
It's letting go.
It's letting go.
It's letting go.
So, that was Dead Money. Overall, a solid DLC. But is it as solid as a bar of gold, or as solid as a fossilized turd? Well, let's look at my categories, starting with characters. This is a category that this DLC absolutely nails. All of the people we come across play key roles in the story, even the ones who aren't physically there like Frederick and Vera. Each of them have distinct personalities, and I love learning about their backstories and their stake in the heist. Dog and God's duality, Dean Domino's snarky charm, and Christine's body gestures while she can't talk all culminate to make themselves super likable. The only character that I'm not too fond of is Elijah, but even with that being said, his motives and actions do tie into the overall theme. It is because of these reasons that I have to give the characters in this DLC a perfect 10 out of 10. Now on to story, and this is another category that this DLC really excels at. I said earlier that I really love the premise of having to assemble a team to do a heist. The story that is being told here is rather sad when considering what took place before the player character enters the fray, and I do really love the theme, even though taking the gold totally negates what the game was going for. But again, this ties back into choice. What if the person playing doesn't care about letting go? It should be their choice to take the gold, despite what the game implies what you should do. To be entirely honest though, I don't understand the whole story. I think I get the majority of it, but I know that I'm missing on a decent amount. Like, I don't fully get the stuff between Vera, Dean Domino, and Frederick Sinclair. Maybe I didn't look hard enough. Still, I do really appreciate what I do understand. I am giving the story a solid 8 out of 10. The setting is an interesting one. While it's true that the Sierra Madre is a cool location, you don't spend the entire time there. The majority of my playthrough was spent in the villa before you get into the casino, and I already said my piece on how I feel about that. The villa feels very restrictive, and there aren't any standout locations that reside within. It all pretty much looks the same. It's only until entering the Sierra Madre itself when I feel like things get better, but not by much. Again, it's a cool area, but there really isn't much to see or do. Yeah, you can play casino games, but you can do that at any other casino in the game as well. The Sierra Madre works in service with the story perfectly, but beyond that, it doesn't offer much. The setting for Dead Money is a 4 out of 10. Now, this is probably the most subjective category that I have, but I think that it's an important one because, after all, I'm just an average player. I don't think I had very much fun playing this DLC. I felt like I had to slowly trudge my way through the areas because of the radios and toxic clouds that are everywhere. I also thought that the constant trial and error for making my way was also annoying. I had fun interacting with the characters and learning about the story, but beyond that, I didn't feel the gameplay was very entertaining. The ghost people are the only enemies that you fight, and there isn't a variety, and no, the hologram people don't count. They're treated more like an obstacle that you have to avoid, not actual enemies that you have to eliminate, though you sometimes can. I'm curious if anyone else feels this way about this DLC, but thankfully the story and characters make it fun, though I can't say the same about the general gameplay. I mean, it literally feels like you have a bomb collar around your neck, so I guess they did a good job there. 5 out of 10. Now for the longevity, the impact that this DLC has on the main game. Well, one big factor that I'm considering is that once you leave, you can never go back unless you start a new playthrough. Meaning that if you miss something, tough kumquats. But yeah, never being able to return is huge. Thankfully, there are some cool weapons to bring back with you to the Mojave, and the Sierra Madre Martini item is really useful. On top of this DLC raised the level cap by 5, which is very good and will stick with the player no matter what, but I'll say it now, every major DLC raised the level cap by 5. And of course this DLC lets you have an early retirement if you're able to retrieve the gold from the vault. Honestly, the level cap increase alone is good, but besides that, this DLC is more of a one-time experience and doesn't have many long-lasting items that make it worthwhile. It is for these reasons that Dead Money has a longevity of 3 out of 10. In total, Dead Money gets a whopping 30 out of 50.
I offered you friendship, and you spat in my face.
Just like my grade for math in high school, it's a perfect D. But that was only the first DLC that New Vegas has to offer. And honestly, I can't wait to be moving on to Honest Hearts. This DLC starts by traveling to the Northern Passage at the top of the map. We get asked with escorting a caravan to a place called New Canaan in Utah. Leading this caravan is Jed Masterson, who is voiced by a very familiar actor to me.
Not too many decent places to stop and trade. New Canaan's one of the only ones left I know about.
Stop right there, I mean it!
Put the gun down, bitch!
He tells us that we can only carry 75 pounds or less with us, or I believe 100 if you pass a survival check. Right away, this is much better than Dead Money, which takes away everything from you. Similar to Dead Money though, once we begin the DLC, we cannot return to the Mojave until it's over. Our caravan ends up in Zion, and holy Brahman, this place looks beautiful. It's so open and has a very calming color. What? Sorry, I think I was sipping on some Jake juice while I was writing this, if you know what I'm saying. Anyways, this scenery is nothing like the start of Dead Money. I just want to take a deep breath of fresh air. What on earth could go wrong?
Hold on now. God damn it, ambush!
Sitting ducks. Here I come. I was a sheriff once,
Okay, so we get ambushed by a tribe that call themselves the White Legs because they come from the Great Salt Lake. It's a cool detail. They wipe out our whole group and we're left as the sole survivor. Thankfully, we find a friendly local named Follows Chalk. I like him a lot. He always seems to be in a good mood and kinda has a laid-back attitude. He tells us that someone named Joshua would like to meet us, so we tag along with Follows Chalk to meet him. On our way there, we get to see some of the types of enemies that we'll face, including the formidable Yaoguai. Already, this DLC has 3 times as many types of enemies than Dead Money, and we just started. So we make it to where this Joshua person is at the Dead Horses camp, and we talk to this lady here. As you can see, our options that we have here are pretty colorful. There's a perk called Sneering Imperialist that overall isn't very useful, but gives us some unique dialogue with the people here. It's my first time playing with it, and I don't regret picking it up. It's just too hilarious. We tell her that we'll be on our best behavior for Joshua, and then go on to meet the man himself.
We should have given you a better welcome on your first visit to Zion. But from what I hear, the White Legs beat us to it.
God dang, what a dreamboat, and not to mention an absolute king. Joshua Graham is one of the best characters that New Vegas as a whole has to offer. He has an extremely interesting backstory, as he was one of the founders of Caesar's Legion, being its first legate. Graham, however, led the Legion to a major defeat at the first battle of the Hoover Dam against the NCR. As punishment for this defeat, Caesar had him covered in pitch, set on fire, and hurled into the Grand Canyon, and was made an example of what happens when you fail in the Legion. Despite all this, however, Joshua survived. Now he's known as the Burned Man in legends that people tell about the ordeal. As a result, he's covered in bandages and is the leader of the Dead Horses tribe in Zion. He welcomes us and comments on us being a courier and says that we weren't the one who he was expecting, much like God from Dead Money. Our goal now, since we lost our caravan, is to basically return to the Mojave. Joshua says that he can show us the way back, but can't because of what's happening in Zion. The White Legs are attacking the other 2 tribes in the area, the Dead Horses and the Sorrows. See, the White Legs want entry into the Legion, so as a rite of passage they need to wipe out the other tribes to prove themselves. Joshua thinks that it might be necessary to evacuate the tribes from Zion. Viewers, let us open the Bible that we keep under our pillows to the book of Acts, chapter 20, verse 35. In everything I have shown you that, by working hard, we must help the weak. In this way we remember the Lord's words, it is more blessed to give than to receive. So, we offer our assistance.
You're a good neighbor to us. We all go through periods of darkness. In such times we can turn to the Lord, but it's good to have friends.
We have to find some pre-war tools that will help navigate beyond Zion. We, with the help of Follows Chalk, gather the things that Joshua needs. Along the way, we see some familiar enemies like Mantises and Cazadors, and we get to see more of what Zion has to offer. This is what I want in my DLC, actual explorable locations. Once we have the items that Joshua needs, we go to the Sorrows tribe's camp to meet up with his friend, Daniel. Daniel is similar to Joshua in the way that he cares a great deal about the tribes of Zion, and would like nothing more than to avoid a confrontation with the White Legs. We also meet another companion in Waking Cloud. She plays a similar role to Follows Chalk, and I like her just about the same. Now, we could continue the main quest, but why do that when we can do some side quests? Yes, side quests in a DLC, who would have thought? It's always nice to take a break from the main quest every now and then, especially when that break consists of taking drugs and slaying a monstrous Yaoguai. When we speak to Joshua again, he tells us of another option to settle our White Legs problem, an option that Joshua would really like to do. Instead of evacuating Zion, we can defend it. We can take it upon ourselves to cleanse this holy land of the Lord, because after all,
we can't expect God to do all the work.
This choice does not please Daniel one bit. He believes that if the Sorrows were to fight the White Legs, they would lose their identity and become savage warriors. This is the big choice of this DLC, to stay and fight for Zion or to evacuate it. I decided to fight, since that's what Joshua thinks would be best, and I agree with him. Daniel expresses his distaste for what we're about to do, but it's time to make the White Legs run with their tail between them. You and Joshua proceed up the river, taking out White Legs along the way. It's a decent trek, but having Joshua along the way is reassuring. Eventually, we make it to the White Legs' leader, Salt Upon Wounds.
Outman. Kunaman mad. He killed all White Legs. You talk. You stop.
Now usually, I like to talk out my problems, but this just seemed like the most appropriate option at the time.
Bika Kerr, you devil!
After that, Joshua shows us the way home. Again, we get a synopsis of what happens as a result of our choices, and we leave with a handful of really cool items. And with that concludes Honest Hearts. This DLC falls on the short side, and it took me only about 2.5 hours. Still, I think that it has a lot to offer, so let's check it out. Character-wise, this is a step down from Dead Money. Joshua steals the whole show here, and no character compares to him. The other characters don't feel bad, just kind of so-so and boring. Except for my darling Follows Chalk.
Why do you carry all those bottle caps anyway? They jangle like crazy.
Characters get a 6 out of 10, and that's pretty much all because of Joshua. Next up is story. It's a lot simpler here than what we've seen before, but that doesn't mean it's bad. I really enjoyed the question of staying to fight or leaving Zion. The player's motive is okay too. I mean, really, it's the same as Dead Money, which is to escape. I gave Dead Money an 8, but I feel like after playing this one, I should raise that story score up to a 9 because of its complexity. But for Honest Hearts, I feel like it should get nothing less than a 7. The setting is this DLC's strong suit. Zion is so fun to explore, the map is a decent size, and there are a number of memorable locations like the ranger stations and the crash plane at the Patriarch's campground. It's awesome! Plus, Zion gives me major Skyrim vibes. I mean, just check this out. Plus, this is just like Mount Charleston in the base game. It's not the kind of area that you usually see in a Fallout game. It's clean, it's big, and it's fun to explore. Zion gives Honest Hearts a 10 out of 10. In case you couldn't already tell, I had fun with this DLC. Stomping the white legs and defending Zion was satisfying, and the weapons that you can find here make fighting enemies refreshing. The 45 auto pistol and She's Embrace are just 2 examples of some really fun weapons. As I said earlier, exploring is super satisfying, and I really appreciate the things that you can do and find in Zion. The fun factor is also a 7 out of 10. Now for the longevity that this DLC has on the base game. Well, a big one is that you can actually return to Zion, anytime you want even, and can go back to anything that you missed and finish up any quests that you left behind. This is huge, especially when compared to Dead Money. The weapons that you get from this DLC can be used for the rest of your adventure, and they're really good. Also, the level cap and perks from this DLC raise its ranking a bit too. For longevity, Honest Hearts gets a 7 out of 10 as well, a big step up from Dead Money's 3. This gives Honest Hearts a total of 37 points out of 50, a solid C.
You want forgiveness? Get religion.
Now that Honest Hearts is done with, I'm starting to feel a little nostalgic. I think I might have a case of the Old World Blues. To start Old World Blues, you have to travel south of Nipton and go to this crashed satellite. I love the name of the quest that you get to start this DLC. It gives me heavy Rocky Horror Picture Show vibes. Much like the previous DLCs, we cannot return to the Mojave until we finish, except that this time we can take whatever we want with us. I feel like with each DLC, the requirements to start them are opening up more and more, and I really like that. Once we arrive though, our character wakes up and feels oddly heavier, and we notice surgical scars around our whole body. And it looks like someone may have taken our kidney!
Oh, they took my freaking kidney!
Just kidding, but let's find out what really happened. We eventually stumble into a room and find these 5 floating brain robot thingies. Here we meet the 5 members of the think tank: Dr. Klein, Dr. Boris, Dr. Dalla, Dr. 8, and Dr. O. They're all in charge here at the Big Empty and use the area to conduct several experiments, some that we are already familiar with. The Cazadors and the Night Stalkers from the base game originated here, even though they deny that they could ever have gotten out. Anyway, I hope that you like dialogue, because this DLC has a ton of it. I would even go as far as to say that it has more dialogue than some of the DLCs combined. Heck, probably even all of them. It took me an hour and 15 minutes just to step outside for the first time. It's that much talking. But the conversations that you have with them are just so fun, and these doctors may all look the same, but they each have distinct personalities and little quirks that make them super memorable and likable. Take Dr. Dalla for example. She tries to maintain her professionalism and her scientific rationale, but she lets her personal vices get in the way. Mainly her obsession with formography. Also, there's 8, who can only talk with these scrambled characters. Much like Christine, you have to kind of guess what he's talking about. He does have one of my favorite interactions in the whole game though. Anyways, midway through talking to the scientists, we get an incoming transmission from the Forbidden Zone from Dr. Mobius. He's the main threat in this DLC and will stop at nothing to stop us from reaching him. But we have to reach him because Mobius has something that is very precious to us. Our brain. Yes, the reason that we have all these scars is because the think tank removed our brain, spine, and our heart. How rude! So we set off to find some items that the think tank will use to reach Dr. Mobius. Before we head out though, we learned that before we arrived here, the Big Empty had some previous visitors, mainly Father Elijah, Christine, and this mysterious courier that we've been hearing about. Dr. Klein even spoke to this person, although he doesn't remember much from the conversation, only that his name was from an old language almost impossible to speak. So it looks like the story has come full circle at the Big Empty, but now let's go out in the world and see what we can find. Upon first setting out into the world, we see some very industrious looking buildings and robots everywhere. It's very Fallout. Almost every location in the Big Empty is home to some sort of weird or crazy experiment. First, we have to take this little test to retrieve Gabe the dog's bark. He's a super good boy and belongs to Dr. Boris. Once we have the good boy's woofer, we travel to another area to grab an antenna off a satellite. When I was traveling to the next area, I stumbled across an area called Ulysses Point. Inside, we can find some useful items and a recording between this person named Ulysses and Christine from Dead Money. It takes place before those events, and I think that it's safe to say that Ulysses is our mystery courier. On our way to the last location, we run into this enemy that looks like the spooky space kook from Scooby-Doo. On top of the robots, the other enemies in the area are all just experiments from the think tank. It's really fun fighting robo-dogs just like Rex, and while the scorpions are tough, they're still neat additions to the enemy roster. So the last thing we need is this stealth suit, which many players can attest to is one of the best armors in the whole game. It gives the player a ton of skill and special buffs, and even has a funny lady's voice to go along with it.
Painkiller reserves critical. Oh, the pain.
Once we have the stealth suit, we return back to our robot friends for our next task. It's time to confront Dr. Mobius and get our brain back. About time too, I was starting to feel a little dumb walking around without a brain. The road to Dr. Mobius is filled with robo-scorpions, but we just need to keep pushing. These rusty robo-arachnids are pushovers compared to what's behind this door. What's worse than a robo-scorpion? A big robo-scorpion! This is one of the few actual boss fights in the game, or at least it actually feels like a traditional one. You could just fight it straight up, or you can use the terminals in the surrounding area to turn on protectrons, turrets, and other things. Even with the extra help though, it still does a ton of damage, so watch out. Once we scrap the scorpion, the only thing left to do is confront the villainous doctor himself. If the scorpion was this hard, I can't imagine what Dr. Mobius will be like.
Oh, hello there. You are there, aren't you? Forgive my confusion. So hard to tell these days.
God, I should have known. He's just a sweet old man. A little confused, but a freaking cutie. He even gives us candy.
Would you care for a mentat?
We tell him that we want our brain back, and he suggests that we should ask if it wants to be back with us. So we go to talk with our brain, and this hilarious conversation ensues.
Ah, lovely. Figured that out, have we? Would you like a cookie?
Turns out that thing in the tank is more of a dick than a brain, but with some convincing, we can convince it to rejoin us. A brain needs a body just as much as a body needs a brain, and we both feel like something's missing. To put our brain back in our head, we need to go back to the think tank. There's only one problem. The think tank promised that they would help us once we did what they wanted, but they were lying. Really, they want to escape the Big Empty and perform experiments on the entire Mojave. They were the bad guys all along. But if Wreck-It Ralph taught me anything, it's that just because they're bad guys, it doesn't mean that they're bad guys. So let's go and talk it out with them. Here we basically have two options. We can either kill them or convince them to stay. If you spent your time and talked with each member, they will be on your side and do whatever you had in mind for them. I like this ending the best because instead of letting them run amok in the Mojave, you promise to keep coming back and to bring parts of the Mojave with you so that they can still experience new things. With the agreement between us and the think tank, we leave the Big Empty and conclude Old World Blues. What a strong DLC. I was able to finish it in about 3 hours, but I was practically speedrunning it for the video. There is still so much to explore in the Big Empty. Now it's time for me to explore the categories and rank this thing. The characters are a big part of this DLC, and the main ones here give credence to the strong opening. Even design-wise, they are super neat and look nothing like what's in the base game. That's just a surface level comment though. Each character has interesting backgrounds and you can see their influence throughout the Big Empty, such as Dr. Boris's past in high school where you retrieve Gabe's bark. Not to mention, all the characters here are hilarious, and that is thanks to the campy dialogue. I haven't even mentioned the side characters like the objects in the sink, but they are all a pleasure to find and then interact with. Also, your brain, just just as an idea is so much fun. Not since Dead Money were the characters this entertaining, though they are entertaining for their own unique reasons. Old World Blues gets a perfect 10 for characters. The story isn't a very complex one, but its intricacies can be understood even by someone like me who misses a lot of details. It has a very simple driving force, which is to stop Dr. Mobius and find your brain, but it is so much more than that. We finally get more insight into the mysterious courier and the events leading up to Dead Money, and the repercussions if we fail would be a science fiction nightmare for the Mojave. It's a solid yet simple story, which deserves a 7 out of 10. The setting seems almost like a step down from Honest Hearts, but definitely an improvement over Dead Money. The Big Empty feels bigger than Zion, but it isn't as pretty and returns to more of a standard Fallout decal. It's unique, with experiments running around all over the place. The emphasis on science and innovation is a nice theme that is evident throughout the area, and I really like the enemies and other locations that you can go to. As an area, The Big Empty stands out as a strong 8. So far, this is probably the funnest DLC, and that's thanks to the hilarious conversations that you'll be having with the great characters. Also, the weapons and items that you can get are super fun. Look at this gun, for example, the K9000 Cyberdog Gun. It's literally a gun that has a dog brain inside of it, just like the think tank. It barks, growls, and has 2 ears on it that just make me want to scratch him. It's a verified good boy of a gun. Also, seeing the experiments and lobotomites running around the area is scary, but also very humorous in a way that's hard to explain. I think it's because of the think tank's "whoops, I guess we screwed up, oh well" personality. These are poor people and animals, for Kaisar's sake, give it a break! To put it bluntly, yeah, I had fun playing this. Though some of the upgrades that you can get for the sonic emitter can get pretty repetitive at times. I think I can safely put the fun factor at an 8 out of 10. Old World Blues definitely has the longest lasting effect on the game as a whole, and that's because of the available items, perks, and special implants that are available to your character. I mentioned the fun dog gun and the super useful stealth suit, the latter of which you can easily use for the rest of the game. There is also the fact that you can return to the Big Empty anytime to return and explore to your heart's content. There is just so much to find here. With this DLC came very useful perks, mainly Them's Good Eatin' and Implant GRX. These are good for pretty much any character, and Implant GRX has saved my butt tons of times. Finally, after the DLC is over, we get access to 3 separate special perks that are very handy. These are Big Brain, which gives a 10% resistance to chems and an increase to our damage threshold, Cardiac Arrest, which gives us poison resistance, bonus healing, and protection against criticals from robots, and finally Reinforced Spine, which provides us with +2 strength and +2 to our damage threshold. All of these things are incredible for players to have, and therefore Old World Blues gets a perfect 10 for longevity and stands at a 43 out of 50. Damn, that's pretty close to a perfect score. Definitely the strongest one so far. But there's one DLC left. Our story is coming to an end, and the only way we can reach it is by going down the lonesome road. This is it, the final DLC. It all comes to a head here, and this is where all the underlying stories from the other DLCs come together. To start this DLC, we must travel east to the canyon wreckage. Before we even enter, we see a message that says Courier 6 on the front, and it looks like that wherever we're going is called the Divide. This DLC has the least amount of starting restrictions. You can take whatever you want with you, and you can leave at any time. This is what I like for my DLCs, the choice to stay or leave whenever I want. The Divide looks rough upon first arriving, but we head into the silo where we meet a familiar face, Edie. Yeah, I know his name's Eddie, but I'm just so used to calling him Edie, so forgive me for my incorrect pronunciation. We get to learn more about him and just how he got to the Mojave. It turns out that the Edie here is just a copy of him, but we bring him along just because he'll be very useful, and because, of course, he's really cute. We prepare a nuclear missile of some kind, and then on our way out we see some curious messages written on the walls. It seems that whoever is here, they know about us and look at us somewhat distastefully. Once we exit the silo, we finally get to interact with this Ulysses person directly for the first time. He uses Edie to speak, and what he does have to say is very cryptic. There's a lot to learn about Ulysses, but I think the best way to describe him is that he is the anti-protagonist. Not an antagonist per se, or even an anti-hero, but he is almost what we would have been if we went down a different path. Many players side with the NCR, but Ulysses was allied with the Legion. Our character traveled west, while Ulysses traveled the east. Ulysses was even supposed to carry the Platinum chip before us, being the first Courier 6, but then he saw that we would carry it next, so he declined the offer. I personally really like Ulysses, and his voice is so smooth and commanding.
I'm a courier. Courier 6.
was Courier 6. Like you, and not like you. In all the ways that matter.
He tasks us with progressing further into the Divide so that we can eventually come face to face with each other and settle things. The Divide is a very linear area with super tough enemies, and it almost feels like a gauntlet with everything that they throw at you. There are these enemies called the Scorched, which are remnants of NCR and Legion soldiers. There are also Deathclaws in more places than none, and these new enemies called Tunnelers, which aren't bad one at a time, but hit hard and can swarm you quickly. There are also these warheads that block the way that we need to blow up with the detonator. You definitely have your hands full, and you need to make sure that you have enough healing items to tackle this mission. Once we get a bit further, Ulysses begins to talk to us again. I really wish I knew everything that he was talking about, but really I don't. I'm not the only one too, as there are tons of memes about Ulysses and people not knowing what the F he's actually saying. Essentially though, I think that it boils down to the bear and bull must go. Ulysses is a man that is very fixated on the past. He wants to start anew and use how things were in the old world to move forward. Again, this is what I think he wants to do. I don't want to just look everything up and relay that back to you because that is stuff that, while true, is not something that you may pick up on a first playthrough. At least I didn't. Moving on, we eventually reach this area where we have to launch a nuclear missile. This is one of those standout moments, and the collapsing elevator ride down filled with the tunnelers is super tense. Have I said how much this DLC feels like the finale? It definitely feels like the climax to all the DLCs, with Ulysses feeling like the last obstacle. The Divide, though linear, is the perfect setting for something like this, and it feels like we're at the end of the world, surrounded by death and destruction. I mean, we just set off another nuclear missile for crying out loud. The stakes just feel really high and important, and that is something that this DLC does very well. After that hellish elevator, we find ourselves at the home stretch of the Divide, but we're not there yet. We have to fight off more Deathclaws, Scorched, and the Tunneler Queen, which hit like a freaking dump truck on steroids. I don't know if that's possible, but it just feels right. Once again, Ulysses speaks to us, but then steals Edie! That dickhead! We finally reach Ulysses' temple, and inside we can do a number of things. Once we find Edie, we can either leave him or bring him along. Of course I decided to save him because I love Edie, but leaving him does grant a nice perk. All there is to do now is to confront Ulysses, together. The final confrontation with Ulysses seems like a tug of war between differing philosophies, and Ulysses plans on nuking the Mojave in order to rebuild it with his ideals in mind. Our conversation with him here can end in one of two ways. We can either fight Ulysses, or we can convince him to change his mind about destroying the Mojave. I decided to persuade him, but be warned, if you choose to fight him, he has a 10 in all special stats and is one of the hardest bosses in the whole game. If you persuade him though, he says that he can't stop the launch and it has to go somewhere. Then you two have a final stand, together against the Scorched. It's a badass moment. After we deal with the Scorched, Edie says that we might be able to stop the launch, but for a price. To do this, Edie would have to sacrifice himself. It's a touching moment that made me think twice, but in the end, it would save a countless amount of people. So long, Edie, you sweet prince. After stopping another nuclear holocaust, you and Ulysses escape the temple and the DLC comes to an end. Holy crap, what an action-packed ending! Lonesome Road is a fitting end for the DLCs of New Vegas, and feels like a good payoff for the story that we've been led through starting with Dead Money. While it is a good and satisfying ending, it isn't perfect, so let's get into it, starting with the characters. There are basically two main characters in this DLC, being Ulysses and Edie, though more are mentioned through Edie's backstory. Ulysses is a very mentally captivating character, and I found it rather challenging to wrap my head around what he's saying. With that being said, however, his presence is very demanding, and every time he speaks, my ears get drawn to him.
After this, only one flag will remain over the Mojave. Let that one fly, or destroy itself.
Edie, on the other hand, comes off as very cheeky and almost dog-like. His backstory is kind of depressing because he had to leave his creator, who he had a strong relationship with, in order to flee to another chapter of the Enclave in Navarro. Also, he stops at nothing to help you, and I really felt bad having to sacrifice him in the end. It is because of these reasons that Lonesome Road receives a 6 for the characters. The story is nothing short of epic, at least the premise is. Two couriers meet at the end of the world for one final showdown, one last score to settle between two legends. It's awesome. That and seeing how the other DLCs built this one up adds to its overall depth. The only thing is, I don't understand Ulysses' motivation and grudge that he has with us. I get what he wants to do, but not his beef that he has with us. He says that we were responsible for destroying the Divide and what it once was, but the dialogue that you can respond with suggests that we had nothing to do with it. Maybe this is something that our character did before we stepped into their shoes, but it's not explicitly stated. It just sounds like he accuses us of this, and I don't really see the evidence. Still, the story, despite its unclear ambiguity at times, is still good. The possible endings are also great. Besides the one that I went with, you can choose to nuke the Legion, NCR, or both like an absolute madman. Altogether, I feel comfortable putting it at a 7. Now the setting. The Divide is a very menacing place, and when I look at it, all I can think of is the end. The destroyed buildings and the constant limbo of the two armies fighting here make the Divide seem frozen in time and untouched by the outside world. That's all good, but the layout of the Divide, like I said earlier, is very linear. There aren't too many places to explore, and by the time you reach the end, you would have been pretty much everywhere. In a way, it reminds me of Dead Money in its linearity, but even I felt like there were still places I didn't explore in the villa. Here it seems like I've been to them all. It's almost a reverse of Dead Money, though in the end it still ranks a little higher. The Divide deserves a 5 in my eyes. Fun factor. Of course I had a fun time playing this DLC. The enemies were really tough, but fun to annihilate. I also really enjoyed making my way through the land, and the goal of finding and dealing with Ulysses was enough to keep me going. Also, my favorite armor in the whole game is here with the Elite Riot gear, so I definitely have a little bit of a bias. But these are my thoughts, even though I am trying to think about things objectively. For fun factor, I have to give Lonesome Road a 7. This DLC probably falls behind Old World Blues when looking at longevity. It's meant to serve as the final location for New Vegas, what with all the hard enemies and skill checks and everything. But Lonesome Road definitely brings things to the table that are crucial to any player. With this DLC, the level cap became 50. Every DLC added a new level cap, but with this final level comes great perks that come with it. Thought You Died, Just Lucky I'm Alive, and Ain't Like That Now are all fantastic in-game perks to give to your character and can be used for numerous gameplay styles. Also, upon completing this DLC, you can put 1 point into any of your special stats. That's really useful and can totally change your skill investment when making new characters from the start with this DLC installed. Plus, you can find armor here that any NCR and Legion fan would appreciate. And the weapons that you can find, like the Red Glare, are awesome as well. Lonesome Road has a longevity of 8 out of 10. Meaning that the final score for this DLC is 33 out of 50.
You are on this council, but we do not grant you the rank of master.
Oh my gosh, this felt like a huge undertaking, and it took a long time to make. I feel like I went more in depth with the DLCs than I did with the base game, but that's okay. A good DLC is supposed to extend the life of a game, and I feel like each of these do that in their own way. Just so that we have a visual, this is the final ranking for them, and I learned a lot about my taste and why which one was my favorite. Now that I'm here at the end, I can't tell if I judged them too harshly or not harsh enough. If I talk smack about your favorite DLC, I am sorry, but I'm really thankful that you stuck around until the end to hear my final thoughts. While I do think that some of the DLCs are better than others, I genuinely think that all of them that are here are enjoyable and give a lot to New Vegas as a whole. Even the underlying story and all the foreshadowing that takes place throughout each one was enough to make me truly fall in love with them. I mean, I feel like the weakest DLC here is as good, if not better, than other ones that are out there. As always, tell me in the comments which DLC is your favorite and what your ranking would look like. If you don't want to tell me that, then just tell me how wrong my opinions are. I welcome it all down in the comments section. I would also like to thank my friend Neon Hobbit for encouraging me and suggesting that I make this video, and to Disboy for being the first and only person to find out who that weird Jedi was in my most forgettable Star Wars video. Thank you both so much. But with that, I have to be going now. Please leave a like on the video if you liked it, or a dislike if you disliked it. One thing that you must do though, is have a good day. That's it everybody, I'll see you all next time.
It's said, war never changes. Men do, through the roads they walk. And this road has reached its end.